All right. Well, welcome everyone to our Ask a Former Inspector webinar. My name is Lauren Wolfer. I serve as Outreach and Advocacy Director for Cook Alliance. For those of you who might not be familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit that is focused on legitimizing the sale of home-based food from permitted home kitchens. We spearheaded the initial legislation that created the MEHKO permit in 2018, and now our programs really are all geared towards lifting up and supporting MEHKO operators. I am very thrilled to be joined by Kendra Wise from CCDEH, the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health. In our work, we have had a lot of fascinating conversations with Kendra. We're really grateful to work closely with her. And so the idea for this kind of came out of the fact that we've had all of these really interesting conversations and these great insights that we thought wouldn't it be wonderful if we could share this with everyone. Real quick, I want to note that this is the second webinar in our summer MEHKO webinar series. We had our MEHKO 101 last month, and we have two more coming up. We have a marketing webinar in August, and then a panel discussion of successful MEHKO operators in September. If you visit our website, the events page, which you can find that in the chat, cookalliance.org/events, you can find more info about our upcoming webinars. And real quick, just a few more housekeeping notes before we hand things over to Kendra. This is, again, Ask a Former Inspector. So we're going to have a pretty robust Q&A session that'll be at the end of the presentation. So if you look down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the little Q&A box. You can go ahead and add questions there whenever they come up. We are going to hold questions until the end of this presentation. And then just another quick note that this is being recorded. So in the future, this will be available on our website if you'd like to review it again. And without further ado, then I am going to hand things over to our fabulous guest speaker, Kendra Wise.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. And I am so glad that we're all get to be here today. And I want to say a special thanks to Lauren and the rest of the team at the Cook Alliance for inviting me to join you today. Lauren's right. We've had a lot of really interesting conversations about MEHKOs and about health departments. And I'm just really pleased to be able to be here and share today. So my goal today is to share with you information and ideas that hopefully will help you better understand what your health inspector does and a little more about the agencies, the organizations that they work for. And the goal is for you to be able to develop a good working relationship with them, because that can be the relationship between a MEHKO operator and their health department can be a really powerful one that can help a lot. And so we'll talk about maybe some ways to help make that a good and positive relationship. So we'll go ahead and get moving on to the presentation. So a little bit about me. I have a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Public Health. So my background is in science and in public health. I also have what's called an REHS. So REHS stands for Registered Environmental Health Specialist. We'll talk a little bit more in a bit about what that means, but I've been in REHS in California for over 20 years. And I used to work as a health inspector in REHS for a county in California. And I also supervised health inspectors for a while. And one of the things I got to do as part of that work was that I actually was with our county when we allowed MEHKOs to operate. And so it was really fun for me to be able to be part of the team that brought MEHKOs to the county that I worked in. I no longer work for a county as a health inspector or as a supervisor. I now work as an independent contractor for the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health. It's a public health nonprofit that works with the environmental health community to help provide support across the state. And we're working on their MEHKO grant program. That's what I do for them right now. I just want to be really clear in this presentation that I'm not representing any environmental health agency, and I'm not officially representing the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health. I'm talking from my own experience as a former inspector and supervisor, and all the opinions that I express here today are mine, and they're based off of my experience. They're not the official viewpoints of any of these organizations. And I also just want to remind everybody that while I was a health inspector, I'm not currently a health inspector, and I'm definitely not your health inspector. So if you are operating a MEHKO or would like to operate a MEHKO, and you have specific questions about like how the law applies to your specific MEHKO, I can share some general information, but you should always check with your environmental health team and your environmental health inspector to get information that's like specifically applied to your MEHKO. So having said that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk a little bit about health inspectors in general, like their training and education background, as well as the agencies that they work for. We're also going to talk about what an inspection of a MEHKO might be like and some tips to help that inspection go well, like what should you focus on. And then I'll also share some ideas for helping build a good relationship with your inspector, because like I said before, and I'll say again, they can be a really great resource for your food business. And then the last is that we'll talk very briefly about permits and permit fees and how they work. Okay, so before we get too far into today's conversation, I just want to talk about some of the terminology I'll be using. You might have heard the terms health inspector and environmental health specialist. I'm definitely going to use both of those terms today. You might have also heard environmental health services and the health department. And you might be wondering, like, are these the same things? Like when she says environmental health specialist, what is she actually talking about? And in general, yeah, we're talking about the same thing. So for purposes of our conversation today, a health inspector and an environmental health specialist are the same thing. And the health department and environmental health services are the same thing. So in California, retail food businesses get their health permits and health inspections from local government agencies that are called environmental health. And local just means that they operate at the city level or the county level. The inspectors who come out to do your inspections are formally called environmental health specialists. Like that's what their job title says, but they're generally known as health inspectors to the general public. And that's because these jobs used to all be part of the health department. And that has changed over time. Some environmental health agencies and health inspectors still do work for health departments. I did. But some are part of other departments, like the environmental health team might work in a community development department or a resource management department, or they might even be their own county department. So your inspector, your health inspector, is actually an environmental health specialist who works for environmental health services, but they may or may not be part of the health department. For our purposes today, we're going to just say that we're going to call it the health department and health inspectors. But I just want you to have that background and keep in mind that in your county or your city, that may not be completely accurate. So what's an environmental health specialist do? Well, sometimes people think that environmental health specialists specialize in protecting the environment, but in reality, an environmental health specialist job is to protect people's health by reducing the risks that people experience from their environment. So in short, like an environmental health specialist is somebody who helps make sure that the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the places that we live, work, and play are healthy and safe. So they really focus on the health of the public and reducing risks to the public's health that can be found in the environment. So in California, environmental health specialists and health inspectors, they're highly trained and highly regulated. They have to have a state registration to do their job, or they have to be training for that registration and being directly supervised by somebody who has that registration. So they either have the registration or they're in a formal supervised training program to get it. And in order to become a registered environmental health specialist, a person in California has to have a 4-year degree that's focused on science. They have to have completed a state required training program or educational program in environmental health. So they have to be specifically trained to do the work of an environmental health specialist. They have to have taken and passed an examination. When I took it, it was a day long. It was 4 hours in the morning, 30-minute lunch, and 4 hours in the afternoon. And it covered around 15 subject areas. Food safety was part of it, but we also had to learn about infection control and solid waste management and sewage management and water safety and swimming pool safety and body art safety, tattoos and piercings. It's hazardous materials management. It was like a really air quality. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. So your specialist is trained in a very broad range of topics, even if they specialize in a smaller one for their day-to-day work. And then once your specialist has their registration from the state, they have to take at least 24 hours of continuing education every 2 years so that they stay up to date in their professional development. I'm saying all this just so that you know that the person who comes to inspect your MEHKO has a lot of education and a lot of training, most of it in science. And then they also have specific training and knowledge in the part of California law that applies directly to MEHKOs. So they can be a really great resource for your business. So like all of us, your environmental health specialist, your inspector has a lot of different roles. They play a lot of different roles in their job, and they actually play a lot of different roles in the community, just like you do. Their job requires them to work independently and make decisions independently. So they will often just make decisions in the field because that's how they're supposed to do working. They have to be flexible and adaptable and able to respond to a lot of different needs and situations with a high level of skill and ability. The vast majority of health inspectors actually really enjoy working out in the field with the community. They chose a job that puts them out with the public doing a wide range of activities every day. And so they see a lot of restaurants and they see a lot of home kitchen operations, which is what part of the reason why they often have really good information and ideas to share. Because if you're having a challenge with something, the odds are good that they've already worked with people who had a similar challenge, and they can talk about, techniques that worked or have worked in other situations that might work for you. Most health inspectors are pretty action oriented. Like they like getting stuff done and they like working with people who are equally action oriented. So that's something that, you probably have in common with them. Entrepreneurs also tend to be action oriented. So it tends to be a good match in lots of ways. And most inspectors live in or near the communities that they work in. So they're often your neighbors, or they might commute into your city or town from another area close by. So you might see them out in the community and, coaching Little League or on the PTA or at a local restaurant eating with their family. So, just like you, they're living in a part of your community. Okay, so what is an inspection like? Now, I know that some of you already have MEHKOs and you've already had an inspector come at least once to your MEHKO because that's part of the permitting process. Before you get your initial permit, they come do an inspection. But for those of you who haven't gone through an inspection yet, the slide is for you, the next couple slides as well. You might be kind of anxious or nervous about having an inspector come to your home, and that's natural and normal, and that's okay. But your inspector's job when they come is just to help make sure that you're able to prepare and serve food safely to the public. Like that's all they're looking at. They might appreciate your decor, right? They might like the flowers in your front yard, but what they are really there to focus on is, can you and do you prepare and store and serve food safely? So in general, they're going to contact you to set up an appointment for the inspection. And we'll talk about the inspection more in the next slide. But during the inspection, your inspector is going to ask you questions, or they might even ask you to demonstrate certain things like, would you please show me how you wash your hands before you prepare food? Or they might ask you if you cook chicken, for example. They might say, hey, would you tell me what's the minimum internal cooking temperature for chicken in order for it to be cooked thoroughly? And they're going to want you to say, oh, it's 165 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds, right? Like they might do sort of those tests of knowledge is what's that called. They might ask you to demonstrate how you sanitize your dishes or the work surfaces in your kitchen. They might ask you where you get the food that you serve. And we'll talk a little bit about that in another slide as well. And you should also feel free to ask them questions. I mean, this is a chance for you to learn from them and to build a relationship with them. So it's a conversation, right? It's back and forth. They're going to ask them questions. You can ask questions. That's a normal part of an inspection. The inspector is also only going to look at the parts of your home that are directly related to your MEHKO. So for example, they'll look at your kitchen. They're going to look at the bathroom that you and your other workers in the MEHKO use while you're working in the MEHKO. If you have like a barbecue or an outdoor cooking area, they're going to look at that area as well. They're going to ask you, where do you keep your trash or recycling? And if you have food waste, how do you dispose of that food waste? Like, do you have a community composting system? And if so, how do you do that? Or does it go in your regular household trash? If you store like packaging or utensils in a room other than your kitchen, they're going to want to look at that space as well. But they're not going to look at your entire home. For example, you're not supposed to store any food or utensils in a place where people sleep, like a bedroom. If you have a studio apartment, slightly different. There's an allocation in the code for that. But if you're in a space that has a bedroom with doors that close, they're not going to go into your bedrooms because that's not a place where you're supposed to be storing food or utensils. It's not considered part of your MEHKO. And so it's a limited inspection. They're just looking at the places in your home that are directly related or that store utensils, equipment, or food for your MEHKO. And after the inspection, the inspector will go over any issues or any findings with you. They'll have this conversation with you during the inspection, but then they'll also write it down in a report. And they'll go over it step by step to give you the chance to ask questions and to help you understand what they want you to do. At the end of the inspection, they'll either give you a written report right there, like they'll print it out on a portable printer, or they'll go back to their office and email it to you at the end of the day. Sometimes they can email it to you from the field. And that report explains everything that happened during the inspection, any violations or observations or problems, as well as the timeline for fixing it. The report will also say if you need to have a follow-up inspection scheduled or if there's anything else that you need to do to stay in compliance with the law. And it's going to have your inspector's name and their contact information on it. That report is something that you also need to keep at your MEHKO. It should print out a copy and keep it there because members of the public can ask to see a copy of your most recent inspection report, and you should just be able to hand it to them so that they can look at it. You don't have to like give them a copy to take with them, but they should be able to read it while they're there and just see how you did on your inspection. So your inspector is going to focus on the 5 main things when they come to your MEHKO. And these 5 things were identified by the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, as the most common causes of foodborne illness in the United States. And so it's food from unapproved sources, contaminated utensils and equipment, poor personal hygiene, foods not cooked properly, and foods that are not kept hot or cold enough. And so that is what your inspector is going to focus on because those are the things most likely to cause a foodborne illness. If you prevent those 5 risk factors, your inspection is going to go pretty well. Like that's it. You get those 5 done. There might be some other stuff you need to fix, but if you have those 5 under control and it looks really good, that's going to be the biggest risks to food safety, and you'll have taken care of them already. We often get questions about approved sources, so we're going to talk a little bit more about those here. One of the questions is, well, what's an approved source? Like, how do I know if a source of food is approved for use in my MEHKO? And food from an approved source means that you get your food from places that are inspected and they meet all applicable federal, state, and local laws. Now, that can be a little daunting because federal, state, and local laws, like there's a lot of them regarding food safety, and you might not always know exactly which ones are which. So keep in mind that you can always call your health department, your environmental health agency, or your health inspector if you have a question about whether or not a particular source is considered approved, a place where you can get your food. So let's say, for example, that you would like to buy directly from a farmer, but you don't know if you can, if that's okay. You can call your health inspector or email them or text them and say, hey, I would really like to buy my food directly from this farmer. Is that an approved source? Is that okay? And your health inspector will be able to tell you if that's an approved source for your MEHKO or not. Likewise, if there's a little independently owned store or convenience market near your home and you would like to be able to go run down there and just buy things occasionally for your MEHKO, but you're not sure if they have a health permit, you can ask them, like, do you have a health permit? And they can show you a health permit that looks kind of like the one you have for your MEHKO, but obviously for a store. Then you're like, okay. But if you're not sure, they're like, here's my business license. Well, that's not a health permit. You want a health permit. You can call your health department and say, I'd like to buy from this little store. Here's their address. Do they have a health permit? Is it okay for me to buy from them? And so they can share that information with you as well. Those phone calls or emails typically don't take very long, and they typically are free of charge. Like, we want you to have approved food sources and to be confident where you're buying your food. So here's some examples of approved sources that you probably don't even need to call about because they're just okay. Warehouse clubs like Sam's Club or BJ's or Costco. You can buy food from grocery stores, so like Vaughn's or Smart and Final, stores like Whole Foods, and each community often has some independently owned grocery stores. Our town certainly does. That's an approved source. You can also buy food from farmers markets and swap meets as long as they have health permits. And a farmer's market, the whole market has a permit for every vendor in the market. So there's one permit and it covers all the farmers markets. I mean, not all the farmers markets, excuse me, all the farmers at that market. A swap meet, each individual food vendor has their own permit. It's a little weird. They look very much the same, but one has a permit that covers all the vendors and the other, each vendor has their own permit. Either way, you can ask, hey, do you guys have a health permit? Can I see it? Um, and you can buy from them if they do. You can also buy from local specialty stores, like butchers or bakers or cheese shops. Again, if you have questions or you're not sure, just ask to see their health permit or call your health agency and they can share with you. And you can also buy from wholesale distributors of foods. So these are larger organizations and they sell food to businesses that then sell them to the public. Like a wholesale distributor is where your grocery store gets their food and where most big restaurants will get their food. You can buy from them as well because you're a business as well. And there are national chains like US Foods or Cisco, but there's also local distributors. I know in our area, and I'm in Southern California, in our area, there's produce distributors that are like Produce Available or the Berryman. There's also like specialized seafood and meat distributors, for example. And so your area probably has them too, and you could buy from them. You also have the ability to buy from gardens. We've already talked about buying from local farms directly, and you can do that. But sometimes people are growing food not on farms, but in gardens, like in their residential areas, their home, or maybe they have, um, an empty lot that they are growing food in. And those are called community food producers. And you can buy food from them. And if you are one of those folks, if you have a garden or you want to grow some herbs or some fruits and vegetables, you can probably grow them and also serve them in your MEHKO, but you should always check with your environmental health agency first, just to see if they have any special requirements for using these as food sources, and if so, what those requirements are, so you can make sure that you're handling them safely. So that's a possibility, but just check with your environmental health team before you use food from other gardeners or your own garden. And I just want to be real clear, be especially sure that you only buy meat, poultry, dairy, and fish from commercially approved and permitted sources. Those are highly regulated foods, and we want to make sure you're getting them from a safe source. All right. So the MEHKO law was designed for you to be able to do it in your home kitchen. So you don't need to worry about remodeling your home kitchen or installing commercial grade appliances. Like, you don't need a 3-compartment sink or a walk-in refrigerator or a high temperature dishwasher in order to have a MEHKO. You can just use what's already in your home kitchen. But there are some pieces of equipment that you might need in order to pass your inspection. So you might need a fire extinguisher. You should check with your local environmental health team about what type and size they want you to have before the inspection. Like, say, hey, do I need a fire extinguisher? And if so, how big of one and what type and where do you want it located in my MEHKO? You are going to need thermometers. You'll need a probe thermometer. So if you look on the screen, the yellow thermometer on the left of the screen, that's called a metal probe thermometer. That happens to be a digital one. And you use those to take the temperatures of the inside of food. That's something you're going to need. Next to it is a little alcohol prep pad. That's how health inspectors sanitize the probes of their thermometers. Because if you're sticking that thermometer in like undercooked chicken, you don't then want to go stick it into like chili or into some other food. You don't want to transfer any of the bacteria from the chicken into other foods. So you have to sanitize it in between uses, and those alcohol wipes will do that really quickly and really easily. If you don't want to use an alcohol wipe, that's fine. You can use the sanitizer that you use for sanitizing your dishes and work surfaces. So like chlorine or quat solutions mixed with water, those work too, and you could use those as well. So you're going to need at least one food thermometer that has a metal probe and is accurate. It needs to be NSF approved, has to be safe to use for food. And then you're also going to need a thermometer for your refrigerator and your freezer. So if you have a separate compartment for your fridge and your freezer, you'll need a thermometer for each one. These are typically bar thermometers, like what you see in the middle. They're just a single bar, and they just go straight into the warmest part of the refrigerator. So typically in the front near the door. Same with the freezer, because we want to make sure your whole fridge is cold enough to keep food safe below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So we put it in the warmest part of the fridge, because if that's cold enough, the rest of it will be cold enough as well. And then you'll also need to have a sanitizer that you can use to sanitize your dishes and utensils and your work surfaces. The most commonly used ones in MEHKOs are chlorine, just regular plain bleach, or quat, quaternary ammonium. It'll say quat sanitizer, and it'll say safe for use in a food facility on it. In order, you'll mix those with water, and you want to get them to a certain concentration, parts per million. For chlorine, it's 100 parts per million, and for quat, it's 200. And you need test strips so that you can make sure you have it strong enough. And you don't want it too strong, you don't want it too weak, right? So the test strips will tell you. And the example that I have on this slide shows test strips for chlorine. If you tear off a little piece of paper and you dip it into the chlorine and water solution, and if there's enough chlorine, it will turn lavender, purple. And then you'll just match it up with the scale on the bottom. For chlorine, you want it to be 100 parts per million. So that second from the right darkness is what you'd use. But you'll definitely need those for your inspection. And if you don't have them, your inspector will ask you to get them because you'll need to use them to make sure you're sanitizing things properly. Also, your kitchen and all the places where you serve and store food and utensils and packaging, you're going to want to make sure that it's clean and that there's no pests or signs of bugs or vermin or mice. I mean, we all live in houses where little animals sometimes come inside. You want to make sure that those creatures aren't in your MEHKO. You want to keep them out. So that'll be something to work on if that's an issue that you've had in the past. And you also want to make sure that the bathroom that you and your MEHKO workers use while you're operating, as well as the kitchen sink, anywhere people might be washing their hands, has hot and cold water from a mixing faucet, which means like it's one faucet or both hot and cold water come through, so you can adjust the temperature. And you want soap in a pump dispenser, a single-use soap in a pump dispenser, and paper towels. So that's for hand washing. We don't want to use reusable cloth towels for hand washing when you're operating your MEHKO. Just checking here to see and make sure I don't miss anything. And I'm also going to say it generally helps to have your MEHKO be well organized. Like there's not a check mark on the list for well organized, but it's important that your home foods are separated from your MEHKO foods and that you explain how you keep them separated. Like, you know, if you have a big bin of chocolate chips, and you have a 5-year-old, how do you keep your kiddo from grabbing a big handful of chocolate chips when the MEHKO is not operating? I had kids, I was a kid, I know how that works, right? So does your health inspector. So those are the types of things that you should be able to explain. And if you have other people in your home, you should talk about how you arrange to not have them be in the kitchen or in your MEHKO while you're operating your MEHKO. So obviously your roommates or your family members live in the home with you, but unless they're working for the MEHKO, they shouldn't be in the MEHKO while it's operating. So if you have pets as well, dogs, cats, birds, whatever, or little kids or older kids, and they're not helping with the MEHKO, like how do you keep them out of the MEHKO space? How do you organize your home life so that the MEHKO is separate from your other home activities like laundry or preparing food for the family? So your inspector will ask you to explain how you do that. That's something that you probably already also put on your application when you applied. So remember that you and your health inspector, you want exactly the same thing. You want the food you make and serve to be safe. And one thing I think that can be helpful to remember is that even though you're cooking in your home kitchen, once you start selling to the public or giving food away to the public, you're not really a home cook anymore, right? You're now a professional. You're running a business out of your home kitchen. And in my experience, successful professionals that I've worked with, they don't take things personally and they don't pass up the chance to learn. They're always into growing and improving and learning from the people around them. So if you think of your health inspector as your coach, they're there to check on you and make sure that you're meeting the standards for safe food. And they can help you get better at doing that. They're only there for like 1 hour out of an entire year, right? The rest of the time, you're the one in charge of making sure that food is safe. And so this is during the inspection is a really wonderful time for you to take advantage of your inspector's experience and knowledge and increase your skill set. So I'd say, you can use that hour with your inspector to improve your knowledge, improve your skills, and it'll help you improve your business. Sometimes when you're talking with your inspector, especially if they're asking you to change the way you do things, or maybe they're even asking you to like discard some food, you might feel really frustrated or like they don't see your point of view or they're not listening to you. And when I was working as an inspector, I would sometimes have those types of conversations. And at one point, I finally realized, like, oh, the person I'm working with doesn't understand that I'm actually always keeping in mind during these conversations the needs of the public and my responsibility to keep the public safe. And so, something that I used to share with the folks that I worked with when I was an inspector, and that I just wanted to share here today, is that each time I talk to somebody or talk to somebody who was a business owner and we were having a challenging conversation, I also wanted them to know that I'm having this conversation with you, right? And I'm here with you. But I'm also thinking about the needs of the public. They're not in the space with us right now. I'm thinking about the most vulnerable people in the population. Think about little kids or people who have compromised immune systems, or people who are cancer patients, or like people who are very elderly. Like I'm thinking about all these folks and I need to keep them safe. Like that's my primary job. So I want to do what I can to accommodate you and to make things work for you. But in the end, I am always going to choose to keep the public safe over doing exactly what the business owner wants. Like a lot of times, like we want the same thing, right? The business owner wants the public to be safe as well. And that's when I, as a science communicator, needed to share like why what was happening wasn't safe for the public. But in the end, when push comes to shove, I'm always going to choose the public. Your health inspector is always going to choose the public's health and safety first, because that's literally their job. That's what they do. So if there's a time when you feel like you're having some conflict and you're not really seeing eye to eye, you might, that might be part of the reason why. So they might be really prioritizing their understanding of the needs of the public in that moment, because that's what they're there for. All right, we're going to switch up a little bit and talk about your health permit. So all MEHKOs are required by law to have a health permit from Environmental Health Services before they open their business. So before you sell, serve, or give away any food to the public, you need to have a health permit. And you might also need a business license from your city or county. So be sure to check about those as well. I'm not going to talk about those tonight. I'm just going to talk about health permits. A health permit's typically valid for 1 year, and it's issued to a person working at a specific location. So in the case of a MEHKO, it's going to be issued to the MEHKO operator and their primary residence, right? Your MEHKO has to be at your home. So your MEHKO permit is going to be to like your name and your address, and both of those things have to be there in order for you to operate your MEHKO. What that means is that you can't transfer that to another location or another person. So let's say that, for example, you have to get your kitchen remodeled, but you don't want to close your MEHKO And so a friend of yours is like, well, hey, you can operate your MEHKO out of my house. Well, actually you can't, because your MEHKO permit is for you at your home, not you at somebody else's home. And so that doesn't work. If your friend has a MEHKO permit, you still can't use their kitchen, because their MEHKO permit is for their kitchen in their home, not for you in their kitchen, right? Likewise, if they want to come over and try out a MEHKO at your place, your MEHKO permit doesn't cover them. They have to have their own permit at their own home. That's how that works. So that's an important thing to realize, is though your MEHKO is to you at your home, you can't leave your home and still have your MEHKO permit cover you. You're also going to pay a permit fee for your MEHKO, and they are typically a couple $100s to a few $100s, which might feel like a lot. But it's because most environmental health agencies don't receive taxpayer money for their regular activities. They're almost all funded entirely by the permit fees of the businesses that they inspect. And so this type of funding is called fee for service. We're just going to talk about it a little bit, because it's not something that a lot of people know about, but it makes a big difference in how permit fees are set. So the way a permit fee for environmental health is typically set, and again, this is typical, this isn't every time, 100% of the time, but most of the places, the counties in California and environmental health jurisdictions use this method, is that they use a fee for service process. And basically, your environmental health inspector, they're going to track how they spend their time each day. So like if they spend 5 minutes on a phone call with a MEHKO, they'll log 5 minutes on their time card to that MEHKO's permit number. And then there's that MEHKO, there's also like a MEHKO reference number that says, hey, 5 minutes to this type of food facility. It's a general category as well. And they'll track how they spend every minute of their workday, all 8 to 10 hours of it. So that they take really detailed notes. I did this when I was an inspector. I had to write down exactly how I spent every minute of my day, had to be accounted for. And I only got a certain amount of time each day for like general office stuff. I had to log it to a specific facility or a specific program, right? That information for all the inspectors goes into one database, and the environmental health management team every so often can go into that database and run a report and say, hey, on average, how long does it take our team to inspect and manage like one MEHKO or one swimming pool or one, tattoo facility or, one large grocery store. Um, and so they'll be able to figure out, like, on average, how long does it take to run a MEHKO, for example? And then they'll know on average how much it costs them to pay an employee per hour. So how much does your inspector cost per hour? And it's not the same as what the inspector makes, right? They have to pay for like their training and education, their supervisor, the building, if they have a car, all of that, insurance, there's all those things there too. So then they can use those two pieces of information to help them come up with the permit fees for each type of business they work with. So if they're like, oh, it takes about an hour and a half to handle a MEHKO, then we might charge around an hour and a half of inspector time per year as the permit fee, because on average that should work out. But they can make adjustments. If the fees are too high, they can see if there's other ways they can lower the fees. And they can't really raise the fees if they feel like they're too low. Like they have to be able to justify the money that they ask for. The law says they can cover reasonable expenses, and so they have to be able to cover justify it. All of these proposed fees then go to the county board of supervisors or the city council or whatever the governing agency is for that environmental health agency. And when I worked for the county. And so our county board of supervisors approved our fees in a public hearing. So there's an opportunity for members of the public to also have some input into the fees. And so because most environmental health agencies don't receive taxpayer funding, they try to be really careful and accurate when they're setting their permit fees. With new programs like MEHKOs, if they haven't had MEHKOs before, they might adjust the fees later on after they have more information. They might make a very educated guess about how much it will cost to run a MEHKO based on the size of like a small restaurant, for example. And then they'll look at those numbers later and say, oh, this was too much or this wasn't enough. And they can make adjustments to permit fees. But in general, they're very specific and they go through a very thorough process in determining how much to charge. And then there's a public hearing process for that. So That's where your permit fees come from, typically. We're about done. We're almost to the question section, but I just wanted to finish up with a couple of thoughts. First, your health inspector isn't out to get you. They're trained to find problems and to fix them. So if they're in your space looking for problems, remember that that's what they're trained to do, right? That's why they're there. And it's something that you both want them to do, right? If there's a problem, you want them to find it before it becomes an issue in food safety. And so it's nice to have a second set of eyes, just double checking and making sure everything is going well. Inspectors have to follow the law and they have to put the needs and safety of the public first. And that means that sometimes they can't be as flexible as they or you would like them to be. And again, it's not personal. Remember that they're responsible for the health and safety of the public. That's literally their job. Also, finally, you guys are a team. Like, you both want the same thing. Your inspector wants the community to have safe food. You want safe food as an important part of what you're doing for your MEHKO, right? And so your inspector can be a really great coach who can help you improve your business. And they can also just be a person that you like to see and they like to see you. So it can be a really pleasurable part of the day. Like, those conversations can be really enriching and rewarding. I know as an inspector, even though I'm no longer working for the county, I actually still see operators out in the field that I, worked with people who ran restaurants or businesses or cottage food operations. And it's just still really good to see them and see how their businesses are growing and doing. And that can be really rewarding for both them and you. So you're a team, you're on the same side, and your inspector wants you to be successful. So thank you all so much for your time today. We have lots of time for questions. I think we're doing pretty good. So if you haven't already and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A. And I see Lauren ready to give you some questions to answer.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Kendra. Really, really interesting stuff. So let's jump right in. First question is, I have a small kitchen and was hoping to use part of my dining area that is connected to my kitchen through a doorway. I would use the dining room area to cool and decorate my cupcakes. Any advice regarding how to include that in my application or how it would be inspected?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so the default answer is always, hey, just check with your environmental health team. But on your application, I would say just what you just said, right? I have an adjoining dining room. It's connected to the kitchen by a doorway. I would like to use the dining room table as a place to cool and decorate my cupcakes. And then you'll explain like how you'll exclude pets or kids or other people from that space when you're doing the cooling and decorating work. So you would put that probably in your standard operating procedures, which is going to be part of your application. There's something like called a standard operating procedure form that explains how you make and prepare foods. And I think that if your dining room is like carpeted, there might be some questions about that. But in general, I think that's something that your environmental health team can help you figure out how to do. Because yeah, a lot of us live in houses with really small kitchens. I'm one of them. So I would say write it down, see what they say, and have that conversation. See if you can figure out a way to get that to work.
So the next question is a little bit similar, but we have a second fridge in our garage and some storage shelves, but we can't guarantee the cleanliness. No
Mhm.
inspection yet. We plan on moving our family foods to the garage and to keep the house for our MEHKO. Will they insist on seeing the garage or areas we are not using for the business? And then a little follow-up is, if we add shelving to the closet that's off of the kitchen for the MEHKO, can we keep coats in the other half of the closet?
Oh, that's a really good question. So each jurisdiction, each environmental health team is going to handle this a little bit differently, right? In general, I would say that if you don't use this space for MEHKO food or equipment storage, it won't be considered part of your MEHKO. So let's say you keep your family food in the fridge in the garage and you keep your MEHKO food in the fridge in the house and you don't ever cross the streams, right? MEHKO food never goes to the garage. And you're able to set up a system that your environmental health team is confident you'll follow, then that's probably something that they would be willing to talk about. Regarding the coats and the storage in the closet, I think that's a really good question. I would check with your team. I would tend to steer away from having like personal possessions in the same space as your MEHKO, like clothing and MEHKO equipment in the same space would make me a little uncomfortable as an inspector, because I'd be worried about possible like cross-contamination, like if you had dust or pollen or dirt on a jacket, I know I get my clothes really dirty sometimes. I garden a lot, I'm outdoors. And then having that hanging in the same space as like utensils or equipment for the MEHKO, that would make me feel a little concerned about cleanliness. So again, I would talk to them about it. Like if there's a divider in the closet, or it's actually like two closets with one door, there might be some options there. So check with them. I think that those are probably possibilities, but I don't want to speak for the team.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
And then on the MEHKO application, when it asks how many employees we will have, if it's just me, do I put like one for me or would I put 0 employees?
I would say, boy, that's a good question. I would probably just say no employees. I'm the only person working in the MEHKO, right? So, because you own the MEHKO, I think that's really just more of a definition thing. If you said one employee, you could say one, I am the owner and employee. There are no other employees. I would just say that. Like, I don't plan on having employees. I'm just going to do it by myself.
Got it. Okay. And then something that's kind of similar to that question is why does the person that's helping deliver the food but not involved in cooking required to get a food handler card?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's because they're responsible for making sure that the food stays safe during delivery. And so they're going to need to understand how to keep foods, hot foods hot and cold foods cold. So like if your delivery is more than 30 minutes, it has to be delivered in an insulated temperature controlling container. Also, they should understand you know, that they don't want to have like their dogs in the back of the car with the food while they're delivering it, that sort of thing. So it's because they're responsible for the food safety while they're doing the delivery that they should have basic food safety knowledge. And that's why they need a food handler's card.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, okay, next question. Do we need to have now this person wrote metal throne thermometer. I think they mean probe.
Probe. Yeah.
If you're mostly baking desserts for your MEHKO.
Um, so if you're mostly baking desserts for your MEHKO, so if you're baking desserts that don't have potentially hazardous frostings, like don't have like frostings that contain milk or cream or dairy or cream cheese, then you might want to consider just having a cottage food operation because there's that's for like shelf stable things that are low risk. MEHKOs are really designed for more. I mean, you can do a bakery out of a MEHKO, but you have to bake and serve on the same day, which can be a little challenging for some stuff. But if you're going to use frostings or things that have like cream cheese or dairy or meat or anything in them, you do have to have that metal probe thermometer. So every MEHKO is going to need a metal probe thermometer. You're not necessarily going to use it on all the foods, right? You won't necessarily use it on cupcakes or use it on cake, but you might use it on frostings or fillings or the other foods. And you do have to have one. It's a requirement in the law. And
Got
they're
it.
cheap, by the way. They're like 12 bucks. They're not super expensive. Um, so, you can get them at Smart and Final for 10 bucks or something. And online, they're pretty inexpensive. So they're not a huge investment.
Okay, great. Then I have a follow-up question on the fridge question. Is it okay to use your personal fridge to store MEHKO food items as long as that there's a designated section for the MEHKO items?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're using the equipment in your home, right? You're going to have some food for home. And so that would be one of the things I would just have it be really clearly defined. Like this is food for the MEHKO, this is food for the family, or my personal food. This is how we keep them separate. And I think that's going to be reasonable. Again, I'm not speaking for your environmental health agency. They might have specific ways they want you to do that, but I don't think that there's ever the expectation that the MEHKO fridge only has MEHKO food in it because it is a home kitchen. We know how that works.
Next question is, can you keep food items like spices in a shared space, or do those also need to be separated out?
Oh, that's a good question. I would ask your inspector what they would prefer and then do what they want you to do. Like if you have like you're baking and you have cinnamon, but you also have it like for your coffee in the morning, for example. Yeah, as an inspector, I probably wouldn't worry too much about stuff like that, but I would want to make sure that it was protected from contamination, right? So if it's a container where you take off the lid and you use a spoon to get it out, I would want to say like, well, how do you know that the spoon was clean if you're also using it for your MEHKO, right? How do you know that the spoon was sanitized? Do you sanitize the spoons that you're using for your family? Or, if somebody just like reaches in and takes a pinch out, how do you control that? I would ask those questions as an inspector, and those are the types of things you would want to think about if you're going to be using, you know, keeping them together with the foods that you use for your family or yourself.
All right. Next question. So I'm going to give you the question and then I'm going to give a little of the context here.
Okay.
But if nothing really has changed since the first inspection occurred, how much more in depth will the next inspection be? Will the inspector ask me to cook or just explain how I cook? And just the little context I want to add is that I believe this person is from LA County that does like a home evaluation and then a routine inspection in the same
Yeah.
year. We know there's a difference. Some counties will just do a single inspection in that first year and some don't. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So in that sort of situation, when there's an inspection to get you started and make sure that you are that you have everything you need to operate safely, and then your routine inspection, the routine inspection, the one that comes later, the second inspection, and the one that you'll have every year thereafter, is really focusing on like how you prepare the food and how you package it, how you deliver it. Whereas the evaluation is more checking just to make sure you have everything you need, that things are okay. They're going to ask questions about how you plan to prepare the food. Do you have basic food safety knowledge? But the routine inspection, they'll be asking more questions about how you actually operate the MEHKO, because that's more of the focus. At least that's been my experience, right? LA County might do it a little differently. So I would be prepared for them to ask you detailed questions about how you prepare, package, serve the food. Um, and it might focus a little more on food handling than the original first inspection did. But if, in subsequent years, not a lot has changed, the inspections will probably be pretty similar. If your inspector sees something that concerns them, they'll go into much more detail on that topic, or they might just be focusing on a specific area that year. Sometimes research within their own information, within their own department shows, hey, folks really need more support in proper cooking temperatures. So let's really focus on that during our inspections. So sometimes you'll see more of an emphasis on a certain topic because the whole department is working on that as a program as well. That shows up sometimes too.
all right. Next question. So my trash cans in the kitchen do not have lids. Both regular trash bins and recycled trash bins are inside the drawer below the counter. Is this okay? Or do I need to have a separate trash can with a lid?
That's a really good question. I mean, I would say so me personally, I'd be like, oh, it's an enclosed space. Like the drawer closes them off so that what we really want to avoid are flies. So lidded flies and pests, right? So that's what a lidded container is for. If I was your inspector and I saw that you had a trash can that was an enclosed space and I did not see flies and I wasn't seeing roaches or bugs or insects, I probably wouldn't worry too much about it. But it's also possible that your agency really wants that trash container to be closed, and so they might ask you to get a container with a lid that you use for your MEHKO. Um, I could see it going either way. Just depends on your inspector. So I would check with them and see what they want you to do.
This is one that we've wondered about for a while. I'm excited to see this come up. So I make sourdough donuts and would like to know if there are provisions for using sourdough starter as it is fed daily, not just on the day of the bake.
Oh, that's a great question.
That one might be
Oh, I
everyone's
don't
favorite
know.
today.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I can't answer this really good question, unfortunately, because that's pretty nuanced, right? Like, so the donuts themselves, you would need to mix, rise, and bake, fry or bake and serve within 24 hours. But the starter as a component of the donuts obviously can't happen within 24 hours. I have a sourdough starter as well. I know how that works. Um, Boy, that's a great question. I would check with I'm going to say I'm punting. I'm going to check with your environmental health specialist because you're not serving the starter, but it does last more than 24 hours. It's going to be up to them whether or not they consider that part of the food of your MEHKO or if they're going to consider it like an ingredient. So I would check with them because you can keep ingredients in your house for more than 24 hours. Like that's not a problem. And
Right.
if they consider it an ingredient, then I can say, yeah, or they might be like, nope. So got to check with
My
them. That's a
basil plant
great, I know,
survive.
right? That's a great question though. Great question.
All right. Next one. I have a small studio to live in at the back of my house. Does this affect my inspection?
So, if you live in your studio, my understanding and my remembering, I'm not going to look it up right now, but the code does make the California Retail Food Code is the part of California law as part of California Health and Safety Code, and it's what regulates MEHKOs. And I think that there's a section in there that says that you can't operate a MEHKO in a bedroom unless it's a studio apartment, in which case there has to be a well-defined space for sleeping that's separate from the space that you're making the food. And if that's the case, then you can go ahead and have a MEHKO in your studio apartment as long as it's like well-defined and separated from your sleeping space. So if you have a studio where you live, you should be able to have a MEHKO in your studio. But what they want, a MEHKO has to be in your primary residence. So if you have like a main house and you want to run the MEHKO in your main house, then you need to live in your main house. Otherwise, you would need to run it in your studio if you're living in your studio. So again, I would double check with your environmental health agency and your inspector, but I believe that you're allowed to have a MEHKO in a studio apartment as long as you have enough space to support safe food handling, right? That's the focus there.
Okay, next question is one that we got in Spanish. And it's, I cook 6 stews. How long do I have to cook them?
Well, you have to cook and serve the food within 24 hours, and you're not supposed to cool it down and reheat it, ideally, right? So what we say in general, and again, each health department handles this a little bit differently, is if you're cooking stew, you cook it and serve it on the same day. So you're going to heat it up and you're going to serve it that day, and then you have to discard it or we say discard. You can't sell or serve the stew after the end of the day. As long as you keep it hot enough to keep it safe. So you cook it to above 135 degrees, depending on what's in it, and hold it at that temperature. You can serve from it all day. You just have to keep it hot, right? But once the end of the day is over, you have to discard it. You can't use it again. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, normally we say that you have to prepare the food, especially if it has like meat or other ingredients, within 2 hours. You have to get it hot enough to be considered hot holding, and then you can hold it for as long as you need to serve it, but you have to cook and serve within the same day.
Next question. What is the best process for cleaning and sanitizing dishes if you have a 1 compartment sink? Do I need an extra container, and how would I rinse?
Okay, that's a great question. So I am going to suggest an option, and your health department or your health inspector may want you to make some changes. But the general method, I also have a 1 compartment sink. So the general method I would suggest is I would get a dish, like a dish tub or a bus tub. I would get a dish pan, right? And I would put that on the counter next to the sink. I would clean and sanitize my sink and the faucet. I would wash my dishes in hot soapy water and then take them out and put them into that clean, sanitized dish pan. And then I would rinse the dishes that are in the dish pan off, right? Stick them back in the dish pan, or if you have a clean, sanitized dish strainer, stick them in the dish strainer. And then I would empty out, clean my sink again, fill it up with my sanitizer solution, and put all my dishes back into the sink to sanitize. And then after they've been in the sanitizer long enough, which is 30 seconds in chlorine or a minute in quat, then I'd put them back into my dish strainer and let them air dry. So basically you're using that dish tub as just a sort of like a holding station for dishes as they're moving in between the different stages. And you're using your sink as the main vessel for washing, rinsing, and sanitizing. It's super awkward, but that's what I could do. Another thing you could do if you have a dish rack that fits inside your sink, like you have a metal stainless steel dish rack that fits inside your 1 compartment sink, is you can wash all the dishes in hot soapy water in the sanitized sink, stick the dishes into the dish rack, right? And then take the whole dish rack, stick it back into your 1 compartment sink and spray it off to rinse everything off. Pull them out, put it back on the counter, clean the sink and put sanitizer in it, put the dishes back in the sink, let them do their thing, and then pull them out to drain in the dish rack again. So you could do that too and just skip the dish pan if you wanted. That's one approach that might work. Yeah, good luck. That's hard.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Next question here. I'm so sorry, I just lost my place. Okay. I currently have a MEHKO and I'm looking to obtain a compact mobile food operations CMFO. The San Diego Health website mentions that, quote, in order to obtain a health permit, plans for the cart must be submitted, reviewed, and approved, and a field inspection must be conducted to verify that the cart was built according to the approved plans. Is there a template or requirement for the cart plan to help me complete my cart plan?
Okay. So this is when you're definitely going to need to call San Diego County, call your health inspector because they might have pre-approved plans for carts, or they might have a list of requirements for carts. And it's really going to depend on what type of food you want to sell off of the cart. So I would, there's a lot of different options that show up depending on the menu that you're going to serve off the cart. So definitely call San Diego, call your health inspector, tell them what you'd like to do, tell them what you want to serve on the cart, and have them help you move through that process because it's going to depend on what your menu is. And also it's going to depend on your MEHKO. They're the ones who are going to be able to help you with that.
Great. Okay, so we're pretty much at time, but if we can go maybe a
Yeah,
little more, if
I'm
Kendra's okay
okay.
with
Yeah,
that.
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
I also want everyone to know, again, reminder that this is being recorded. So if you did miss any of this or you want to go back and review this, this will be available on our website in the future. And also we regularly do MEHKO 101 webinars. So that's a really great place where you can also ask questions if because we're getting a lot of questions, which is awesome. But just in
It's
case we
really
don't
awesome.
get to your question, you can also reach out to us at community@cookalliance.org. And as always, as Kendra keeps reinforcing, the best thing to do is always to talk to your local health department. So just in case, or your environmental health agency.
There you go.
But again, just in case we don't get to your question, but again, we're very excited to have such really awesome participation. And we also have our cook chat on the first Tuesday of every month. But let me see here. Okay, jumping back into questions, we'll do a few more. Really appreciate your taking the time, Kendra. This is awesome.
Sure.
What are the most common concerns for people preparing and selling coffee?
Coffee. It would be it'd be the dairy products that you put in the coffee would be the first thing I would think about. So if you're doing like lattes or cappuccinos or anything that is involving a dairy or non-dairy beverage, that would be wanting to make sure that you keep that cold. And then also if you're using like an espresso machine with a steamer wand or steaming milk, you want to make sure that once that milk is warm, that you keep it hot or that you steam just enough and then disinfect sanitize the container. Disinfection's a higher level. You only have to worry about sanitizing. So that would be the first thing I'd be thinking about. And then also making sure that the machine or the equipment that you're using to make the coffee can be easily cleaned and sanitized. Some of them are hard to clean and sanitize. And so, making sure that if they're connected to a water supply, that connection is safe and doesn't have any toxic metals in the connecting apparatus specifically. Um, Commercial equipment has been checked and tested for that. Home equipment might not always be. So those would be the types of things I would be concerned about. So I'm worried about your dairy products. I want to make sure the equipment can be properly cleaned, and I want to make sure that it's connected to a water supply, that connection system doesn't have any toxic materials in it. Those would be the three things off the top of my head I would want to make sure we're okay if we're looking at coffee. If you're just talking about like pour over drip coffee with a coffee filter and cone, I'm not gonna worry too much about that. But if you're using a machine and the more, ornate coffee making apparatus, then I'd want to make sure all of those equipment can be cleaned and that you kept the dairy products or non-dairy products, as the case may be, properly cold or hot.
Okay. So next question, and I know this is going to have an immediate follow-up. So are you able to cater or participate in public events with a MEHKO permit?
And the answer is no, you cannot. So the MEHKO permit does not allow catering. And catering is really clearly defined in California Health and Safety Code. So a MEHKO, people can eat at your MEHKO, so they can eat at your residence. They can pick up food for takeout, and you can deliver food to them. But what you can't do is take food to their place and set it up on a nice table or serve their guests or do any food prep at their location. All of those things would be considered catering and they're not permitted. Um, as far as a public event, Most of the counties that I've heard from are not allowing MEHKOs to be the commissary for a temporary food facility booth. So if you're going to be at a public event, um, you'll need something called a temporary food facility permit. It's basically a short-term permit that lets you run a small kitchen at like a fair or festival or some type of, community gathering. And if you're preparing all of your food in that booth, then you're fine. But if you want to prepare some of the food at your MEHKO and then take it to that booth, I don't know that many jurisdictions, if any, would allow that. So regarding catering, absolutely not. The law is very clear that MEHKOs don't cater. But for temporary food facilities, I would talk to your local environmental health jurisdiction. It's probably going to depend on your menu and depend on how they're interpreting that section of code. In general, the answer would be no, because MEHKOs are only allowed to do a certain number of meals per day, right? You can only do 30 meals a day or 60 in a week. And if you're going to a festival, you're going to do a lot more than 30 or 60 meals in a single day. So it probably doesn't make sense to try to do a community event out of your MEHKO, just because you could sell way more in a temporary food facility than you could sell it out of your MEHKO. So I would just get a separate temporary food facility permit and do all of the work in the booth, because that would let you sell more food, serve more money, make more money. But check with your environmental health team. They might allow it if you want to just try it out. I think many won't.
Okay. So I have a quick question about HACCP and vacuum sealing, and then we're going to
Yeah.
ask some dishwashing questions.
Okay.
So this question is regarding HACCP certification, which a MEHKO can't have
Nope.
if right. It's
Right.
important. So this person says it's important for me because I want to use reduced oxygen packaging for vacuum sealed smoked meats, which normally requires a HACCP plan. I read somewhere that the HACCP plan is only required for reduced oxygen packaging if you're going to be selling your products in a retail environment, but it is not necessary for selling direct to consumer, which is what most of mine would be. Do you know if that's true or false?
So my initial response on this, and I would probably go do some more research on this, is nope, you can't do reduced oxygen packaging for smoked meats. So there's multiple things here. So first of all, a MEHKO is a retail facility. You are selling that. Retail facilities sell direct to consumers. So like Costco is a retail facility. They're selling direct to consumers. A MEHKO is a retail facility. You're selling direct to consumers, but you're considered retail. HACCP plans are required for reduced oxygen packaging of foods like meats and smoked meats. And then the second question is if you're smoking meats as a method of preservation, not just for flavoring, like smoking meats might be something that your MEHKO may or may not be able to do at all. So I would definitely check with your environmental health team to see if smoking meats on site is something that they're okay with. They are probably absolutely going to say no to reduced oxygen packaging of smoked foods. That's considered high risk for botulism, and that's not something MEHKOs can do. So if you want to do smoked foods, like if you have a smoker, like a barbecue smoker, and you're serving right away, that's one thing. But if you're smoking and trying to package for people to take home, that's something that you really need to talk to your environmental health team about to make sure that everybody understands what you're doing and that you understand what it's okay for you to do at a MEHKO.
Right. So the two kind of similar related dish questions, I'll ask them together, is do I
Sure.
need to have a separate dish drying rack for home use and MEHKO use? And also, is a dishwasher not an option?
Oh, so if you have a dishwasher, you can use a dishwasher. That's fine. And you still have to be able to sanitize your dishes. So if your dishwasher doesn't have a high temperature sanitizing option, you'll need to wash the dishes in the dishwasher and then sanitize them with a chemical sanitizer like chlorine or quat. So that is an option. If you have a dishwasher, go ahead and use it. I don't think you need to have a separate dish rack for MEHKO dishes and home dishes, but what you would need to do is have it emptied of home dishes, right? And then wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry your dish rack before you used it for MEHKOs. So we want to make sure that whenever you're using equipment for your MEHKO, that it's been properly cleaned and sanitized, and your dish rack would be considered equipment in that case as well. So yeah, you can use it. You just have to make sure you keep it sanitized before you use it for MEHKOs.
Okay,
Yeah, and
great.
like you can use like your knives and your cutting boards that you use for home use as well. Like you don't have to have a whole separate set of stuff, but you do have to make sure it's washed, rinsed, sanitized, and air dried before you start using it for your MEHKO.
Okay, that's great.
Mm.
Kendra, I want to thank you again. This is incredible. And I had like sitting in the hot seat and getting the rapid fire questions.
That was super fun.
Yeah, really appreciate your time. And I want to thank everyone for showing up tonight. We are so lucky to have this amazing community. And it's exciting. And this again like underscores everything you're saying, that this is truly a partnership, right? Like we
Oh,
all have
yeah.
the same goal. Everybody wants to make delicious food and keep it safe. And it's wonderful to see all of the synergy and all of these questions. So again, I know that we couldn't get to every question tonight. Please feel free to reach out. I mentioned before, but we have Cook Chat on the first Tuesday of every month at 5:30 p.m. That's a virtual like meetup for people that either have their MEHKO permit or are thinking about getting their MEHKO permit. And we don't know, it's not nearly as great as having our resident food safety expert, but it is a really wonderful way to kind of crowdsource your questions. And with the Cook Alliance team is always there as well with folks that are already doing this. So again, I think we put it in the chat. We'll put it in the chat one more time. The cookalliance.org/events is where you can sign up for that. And also, if you haven't done it already, please make sure to sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media so you don't miss more of these opportunities. But Kendra, I want to go ahead and let you sign off if you have any parting thoughts or any wisdom that you want to share with our community tonight.
So first of all, like I'm just really happy that California has this option for home cooks. Like it's a really cool program. I think it has a lot of opportunities. And one of the things that will help keep it being an option is for everybody to engage with their health department in as a partnership, right? To work together. Because right, we want the same things. I've said this about 47,000 times tonight. So these detailed questions that all of you are asking, these are great questions and they show a lot of really um, deep thinking about the process of your MEHKOs and what you're doing. And your health inspector is going to appreciate that. And I think if you're ever anxious or a little nervous about asking those questions, or they're like, I feel like I'm kind of dumb, I don't know the answer, like it's okay to say to your health inspector, I am learning. I am really excited about this. I want to do this right. And I really appreciate your time as you answer these questions and your patience with me. You just say that straight up front because then it tells them like, oh, you really want to know this information and get better at it. And most health inspectors are going to respond very positively to that because they are naturally teachers and they want to help you. And so as soon as you bring that up and you say, hey, I have these questions and I appreciate your time and I want to do the right thing and can you help me understand? That tells them, hey, this is somebody who wants to work with us. We want to work together. I want to help them learn. So feel free to be clear about why you're asking. It's because you want to know and you want to do your job well. They're going to respect that. They're going to respect you. And they're going to want to work with you to make it happen.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Kendra, and thank you,
You're welcome.
everyone. And you all have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you all for your questions. And thanks so much for having me, Lauren. I really appreciate it.